Making a movie is a lot of hard work. Not only do you have to bring a story into the world out of nothing, but with so many moving pieces, it can sometimes seem impossible to keep track of who is where in what shot. A lot of times, tiny details can seem to be in place, and it isn't until the entire film is assembled that someone notices that something is off. While movie makers do their best to preserve continuity, sometimes mistake can slip by. Usually directors and editors will do their best to hide these mistakes in post-production, but that doesn't mean there aren't still goofs to be found. While there are dozens of other similar lists out there, this list is specific to the mistakes I noticed.
Excellent.
In Revenge of the Sith, Obi-Wan and Anakin engage in an epic duel to conclude George Lucas's 6-part Star Wars saga. The duel was designed to be the greatest spectacle of lightsaber fighting that had yet to be filmed. In addition to being the climax of all lightsaber duels, the duel was also meant to demonstrate the similar abilities of Obi-Wan and Anakin, and the fact that they each knew each other so well, they were able to perfectly mirror each other's abilities. With Anakin having been trained by Obi-Wan and Obi-Wan having observed Anakin for years, they knew each other so well that each movement, each swing, and each spin was perfectly anticipated and countered with each other, making the duel the most choreographed dance of lightsaber battles that we've seen in the Star Wars films. However, in one of the scenes, Anakin is able to pin Obi-Wan on a table and forces a lightsaber onto his neck. Now, the reason I say a lightsaber is it can be difficult to know whose lightsaber it is, since in the first shot, it appears that he is grabbing Obi-Wan's hand and pushing his own lightsaber on his neck. We can see here that it is Obi-Wan's thin neck lightsaber. However, in the next close-up shot and the shot following it, the lightsaber they're holding is actually Anakin's Graflex, making it look like Anakin is pushing his own lightsaber onto Obi-Wan's neck. However, once Obi-Wan kicks Anakin off, he stands up and holds the lightsaber, and it is once again Obi-Wan's lightsaber, making this whole exchange very confusing if you're paying attention to the lightsaber in their hands. Obviously, no one noticed at the time of filming, and either didn't notice in post-production or just hoped that we wouldn't notice. Unfortunately for them, here we are pointing out their mistake that they did not want anyone to be aware of. I guess they just didn't anticipate how much we, the fans, would care about lightsaber design. So that could be a failure on their part depending on how you look at it, but I choose to look at it as a success.
From a certain point of view.
Uncle Owen?
Yeah?
What about that one?
What about that blue one? We'll take that one.
Now, even though mistakes can slip through in newer movies, they were much more common in the older movies, and none more so than A New Hope. However, amongst all of those mistakes, such as stormtroopers hitting their heads and all that fun stuff, there are still some that I haven't seen anyone talk about. And one of my favorites is the magical teleporting abilities of R5-D4. Yes, when R5-D4 is selected by Owen Lars to be the astromech droid of choice, he follows Luke only to have his motivator blow out on the path. It is at that moment that C-3PO suggests maybe R2-D2 would be a good substitute, and the camera shows R2-D2 being prepped by the Jawas. Although if you look closely behind R2-D2, there is R5-D4 right back where he started, only to then be next to Luke again in the next shot. It's clear that this shot was not intended to take place at this part of the story. They were using just a static shot of R2-D2 that was filmed from before R4 was chosen. And that's not an uncommon thing to do. A lot of times we'll take static shots of people looking in one direction or, looking off in the distance and put them in over dialogue for dramatic effect. But it's usually pretty important to pay attention to where the other characters are in the background. And in this one, it just so happened that R4 was not supposed to be where he is in this shot, leading all of us to wonder if R4 really is a magical force-wielding droid.
How many of these things do you think you blasted?
I don't know. Thousands. Probably tens of thousands. Never kept count like some of the boys.
This point here is the only one I want to bring up from the animated series. The animated series does have its own share of mistakes, but for the most part, those mistakes are relegated to animating slip-up or reused assets or things of that nature. But there's one mistake in particular that I want to bring up, and that is a line from Rex in Star Wars Rebels.
Never kept count like some of the boys.
In Season 3, Zeb, Kanan, Ezra, and Rex go to Agamar in hopes of finding some proton bombs, only to find that there is a separatist holdout led by the super tactical droid Kalani, still active on the planet.
Bring them to Agamar.
However, before they encounter Kalani, they are talking about battle droids, and particularly Rex's experience in the Clone Wars, and Zeb asks him how many droids he killed during the war. Rex responds with thousands, maybe tens of thousands, I don't know because, and I quote, I didn't keep track like some of the other boys. Now, this is immediately confusing because Rex's armor is absolutely covered in tally marks. We can see them on his helmet, we can see them on his gloves, we can see them on his arm. If he's not keeping track of kills, now it is clear he's not keeping track of individual battle droid kills because there would be way more tally marks all over his armor, but he's surely keeping track of something. And this line seems to imply that he just isn't vain enough to keep track of kills. So either the animators and character designers and the writers weren't communicating, which wouldn't make sense with what we know of Dave Filoni being super involved in both elements of the process, or Rex is just lying here. In either case, Rex is clearly keeping track of something, even though he claims to be above such petty competitions.
I'll never understand how you can simplify these battles into some kind of game.
Going back to A New Hope, I know it's not really fair considering when the movie was made and the budget of the film, but there are some fun mistakes and I just can't help but point them out. And this one is another one of a shot that was used in the wrong order. After Obi-Wan disappears into the Force, Vader kicks his cloak, and then in the next shot we see a wide shot where Vader is walking away down the hallway. However, we then cut to Vader and he's still standing over the cloak of Obi-Wan, and then doesn't. He leaves, but then is immediately back, bringing up the importance of just how critical it is to edit your shots in order. Now, I don't want to pick on the original trilogy too much, so going back to the prequels, we have a CGI mistake from Jango Fett in Attack of the Clones. After shooting a Jedi off of the platform and saving Count Dooku from immediate assassination, he does a cowboy spin with his blaster and holsters it at his side. However, if you're watching the holster, it immediately shifts position directly after he holsters it. Clearly, these were two different shots or renders of Jango that were spliced together, and it's not unlike the type of stuff you'd see when the lightsaber's activated in A New Hope. Now, I'm not counting those because that was limited to the technology at the time, but this was 2002. They knew better. They should have been able to catch that. They had the technology to make that work, and yet here we've got Jango's holster suddenly hiking up his leg for no reason at all.
A battle! There's been some terrible mistake!
Fight is coming in.
Now, we all know CGI has its problems, but that's not to say that practical effects are perfect. In fact, one of the downsides of using models for their ships and vehicles were some of the filming limitations. One of those filming limitations is you can only film a model from so far away, especially on the size of film that they were using back in 1983, because we are talking about Return of the Jedi. Yes, in Return of the Jedi, in fact, they had so many TIE fighters on screen that a decent chunk of them actually weren't ILM models and were actually TIE fighter toys that they had put in the background hoping that you wouldn't notice. But that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is this shot here where the TIE fighters are attacking Lando. Yeah, so again, one of the limitations of filming with models is you can only shoot the model from so far away. You can't go all the way back. You can't make it teeny tiny like you can with CG. And so in order to get the TIE fighters zooming in up to the Millennium Falcon, they actually just kind of appear out of nothing when they're about that far away. And it, when you're watching at full speed, you don't really notice this. But if you're watching frame by frame, like I have to do sometimes when I'm editing, you'll notice that all of a sudden there are TIE fighters popping out of nowhere. And this is a limitation with how far away you can be from a model while you're actually filming, making this less of a mistake and more of a limitation. Still, it is something really fun that I noticed and wanted to share with all my friends.
Only the fighters are attacking. I wonder what those Star Destroyers are waiting for.
Now, before I reveal the last mistake on my list, I wanted to list some honorable mentions that were either mistakes that someone else had pointed out to me or things that just weren't big enough to get their own point. Going back to the prequels, in the famous I am the Senate scene, Palpatine does his special force twirl through the air and lands in the middle of the Jedi. However, in the next shot, he is suddenly right in front of Eeth Koth, being quite an interesting little teleport, and some have actually tried to explain this, saying that this is a secret force ability that Palpatine had. Well, I'm not quite in that boat. I do think it's interesting, and I did include this in the honorable mentions because that has been pointed out to me before. Something that no one has pointed out to me, but was not big enough to get its own point, is in The Mandalorian Episode 8, we can see the Mandalorian getting ready to put on his jetpack for the first time. He loads the jetpack onto his back and gets ready to go up. In the next shot, we see a shot of someone else, and in the background we can see Mando holding his jetpack again, even though he already put it on his back. Again, this is a shot that was edited out of order. We have a reaction shot that we have put here over some dialogue, but because it was out of order, the things that are going on in the background actually mess up the timeline. Another one that everyone knows about is, of course, Vader walking through the Lambda shuttle in Return of the Jedi. And, of course, my favorite honorable mention in A New Hope, when Luke sees Leia, he calls out her name. Yep, that's in the movie. You can look that up. The subtitles try to say Leia, but he absolutely calls her Carrie on set, and they kept it in the movie, which I think is glorious.
Darth Vader, only you could be so bold. The Imperial Senate will not sit still for this. When they hear you've attacked a diplomatic...
Don't act so surprised, Your Highness.
Now this one is a mistake, and it has to do with costume design and shot continuity. A lot of times when you're on set, between shots, you'll, take a breath, get a drink of water, maybe you'll use the restroom. Sometimes lunch happens between two shots in the same scene. And so there's a lot of things that are potential to change, and you can have something like a water glass that is set in one spot, and then the next shot is not there. Or maybe, while you were taking a break, you took off your hot, sweaty helmet and put it on the wrong way when you came back. That is something that happens back and forth over and over and over again throughout A New Hope. So Vader's helmet has this little swoop-de-doo that comes down from his neck and covers the upper part of his collarbone. And I imagine that that was supposed to go over his cape. However, there's several shots where you can see clearly that the cape was put on after the helmet. In many of the shots, Vader's neck piece covers the cape chain and the upper portion of the cape. However, in some shots, you can see that the cape chain is over the neck piece. Now, this means that in some of the shots, the cape was put on after the helmet, whereas in other shots, he put on the cape and then the helmet, showing us just how many times he's taking off the cape and the helmet between these shots. Of course, in later renditions of Vader, they did try to preserve a singular look of Vader throughout the entire film, and you can see this kind of going back and forth, whereas in Rogue One, you can see that throughout the entire film, his neck piece covers the cape chain. However, in Revenge of the Sith, you can see that his cape chain goes over the helmet. So both of these ended up becoming canon looks for Vader, meaning that both of these types of armor are different styles that Vader will have had throughout the permutations that occurred over the years. However, something tells me that these permutations weren't happening instantaneously with one look of Leia changing whether his cape or helmet was put on first. But anyway, those were 10 mistakes that I personally noticed and found specifically to share with you, my friends. Let me know which one is your favorite, which one was the funniest, and which one do you think breaks Star Wars the most, because I want to know what you, my friends, have to say about our favorite galaxy far, far away. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you did enjoy the video, or if you learned absolutely nothing new, feel free to leave a thumbs down, absolutely guilt-free, because that does tell me I'm not doing my job. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, may the lore be with you. now and forever.